whom we remember today. Monsignor Plaka, President Emeritus Stanley, members of the Christian Brothers community, faculty, students, staff, and alumni of the college, distinguished guests. It is my honor to welcome all to the chapel of De La Salle and his brothers, the very heart of this college, for this service of remembrance. This afternoon, we acknowledge a great loss. 10 years ago, 20 beloved members of the Manhattan College community were taken suddenly from among us, and scores of their family members and friends were left to grieve and question and to struggle to put the pieces of their lives back together. These 20 were among the more than 3,000 who lost their lives that day in New York, Washington, D.C., and Pennsylvania in attacks that were intended to paralyze our city and our country with terror, to tear us asunder, to tempt us to lose faith. We are here to mourn that great loss, yes, but we are also gathered 10 years later to reassert the claims of life and hope, and especially of faith. Faith in a boundless love that suffers all, endures all, and never fails. Our very gathering and remembering is itself an act of that love. As the word remember suggests, to remember is actively and deliberately to pull together into a whole what time and distance has separated, to assert what may seem far away and lost, to assert that what may seem far away and lost is actually constantly close and present, always available to us through the love that binds us together in the community. The 20 members of our family whom we remember today are not lost to us. They are, through our love, always and forever among us. They are here with us today. In a letter conveying greetings and expressing his regret that he could not join us today in person, Mayor Michael Bloomberg asks that I assure you that he is with us here in spirit. As you pay tribute to those we lost, the mayor writes, I join you in honoring their lives and in finding inspiration in their memories, and in our cities and our country's enduring and indomitable spirit. Brother Robert Berger, Associate Professor of Religious Studies and Manhattan College alumnus, will begin our remembrance with prayer. Brother Robert.
Please remain seated. As the nation remembers, we do what we always do. Let us remember that we are in the holy presence of God. We turn our hearts and mind to you, O God, as we remember unimaginable loss, resilience, love, and healing. God of understanding, we will never make sense of the madness that visited our city that day. As women and men of faith, we seek your light and your guidance as we remember such terrible events. Grant that those whose lives are spared may live in such a way that the lives lost may not have been lost in vain. We love those we lost, and we have pride for those who gave their lives for others. 9/11 has shown us, O God, the truth of your word, that darkness never overtakes the light, and hatred will never destroy love. O God of peace, Bring your peace to those parts of the world that still experience powerlessness, terror, and horror. Comfort and console those who need your loving touch. Strengthen us in hope, and give us the wisdom and courage to work tirelessly for a world where true peace and love reign among nations and in the hearts of all. Finally, grant us creative days and restful nights. We ask all this as a community who remembers the past, embraces the present, and travels together into the future. Amen.
That the city would come back. We are honored to have with us this afternoon the person whom New Yorkers, Americans, and indeed the world came to know intimately in the hours, days, and weeks following the attacks as the very embodiment of that spirit of resiliency to which Mr. McGrath was referring. The leadership of Mayor Rudolph Giuliani and his role in uniting the city in its recovery efforts is, of course, legendary. His calm in the midst of chaos, coupled with his passionate faith in the spirit of New Yorkers, made him America's mayor and assured us that we could indeed find the way forward. A quotation from the Time magazine issue in which he was named Person of the Year for 2001 captures well the spirit that animated his leadership. Tomorrow, New York is going to be here, he said, and we're going to rebuild, and we're going to be stronger than we were before. I want the people of New York to be an example to the rest of the country and the rest of the world that terrorism cannot stop us. It is my honor and privilege to introduce to you the 107th Mayor of New York City, and of course, Manhattan College alumnus, the Honorable Rudolph W. Giuliani.
thank you very much for having me here. This is very helpful for me to be back here at a time like this, particularly because so much of what I believe, what I know, and what I can do was formed here at Manhattan College. So it is very, really emotional for me to be back here. It's a very difficult time to relive. It's a very difficult time for me and for thousands and thousands of others to relive it, because it was probably, without any question, the worst day of my life, the worst day of the life of the city of New York, maybe in the United States history. And it was also the greatest and the most inspiring day in our history. So it is extraordinarily complicated. My emotions are very complicated. My feelings about it are very complicated. I think about September 11th every day. I think about sometimes the horrible things that happened, and sometimes the unbelievably wonderful things that happened. But it's with me all the time. So the 10th anniversary, I'm not sure how I'm going to react to it. I don't have any prepared remarks or a speech or notes or a teleprompter. So I'm just going to tell you what I feel in my heart. First, I'm going to tell you about the day, and then I'll tell you, at least to the extent that I've drawn some conclusions about it, the conclusions that I've drawn about it. The day started as a beautiful fall day in New York City. More beautiful than even today. It was a quiet day for me. I was the mayor of New York. I was about ready to leave office. I was planning my future. And it was primary day in New York City. It was the day in which the Republican Party and Democratic Party were having a primary to select the candidates to run for my office because I was term limited. So I thought it would be a really quiet day. I thought we wouldn't start having real problems until the late afternoon when everybody started to claim voter fraud. Because that always happens in every election. But that doesn't usually happen until 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. So I scheduled a breakfast at the Peninsula Hotel with 2 friends of mine. One was my counsel, Dennis Young, and the other was Bill Simon, who was a good friend of mine, former assistant U.S. attorney who worked for me when I was United States attorney. And he was considering running for governor of California. And he wanted to talk with me about what kind of chance he had. And so we had a very interesting discussion about California politics, which is more complicated than even New York politics. And we were about to end the breakfast, and a police officer, a detective, Patty Verone, who was on my detail, walked up to Denny Young, whispered in his ear. Denny, who is unflappable and very calm, seemed agitated. And he leaned over to me and he said, Mayor, there's a very bad fire at the World Trade Center. They think a twin-engine plane has hit the North Tower. And it looks like it's a really bad fire. So we both said, we've got to get down there right away. We said goodbye to Bill. And he said, God bless you. I don't think he understood at that time the dimension of it. He just said that. It always struck me as a very appropriate thing to say. We walked out on the street, and I looked up in the sky, and I saw a beautifully blue sky without a single cloud. And the first conclusion that I came to was, this could not be an accident. It couldn't be a plane that just got off course and made a mistake. This had to have been a deliberate act. But I didn't know whether it was an act of terrorism or possibly an insane act. Someone with some kind of insane grievance against a business in the World Trade Center or some personal issue. But we got in the van, the police van, and we rushed down to the site, which is about 6 miles away. Peninsula Hotel is on 55th Street. As we were rushing down, we could see the tremendous flames at the top of the building. So it looked immediately like it was worse than it was described. We reached the police department. We tried to reach the governor. Couldn't get certain calls through. Other calls got through. We passed St. Vincent's Hospital, which is about 2 miles away from the site. And the first really ominous thing that I saw was, I saw all the doctors and nurses at St. Vincent's Hospital out on the street with stretchers. And somehow it said to me this looked more like a war zone than a city. This looked like something you might see in Vietnam or the Second World War. They seemed to be getting ready for a significant number of people and injuries. But that sort of passed out of my mind, and we got about a mile away, and we saw a big explosion. We didn't know what it was, and within about 30 seconds, the police commissioner called and told us that a second plane had hit the other town. So, of course, at that point, we knew it was a terrorist attack. Within seconds, we were there. We were about 3 blocks away. The police commissioner and my first deputy mayor ran up to me, and Joe Loder, my first deputy mayor, said to me, "Mayor, this is terrible. It's awful. People are jumping out the windows." I looked up at the building. I saw debris coming down. I didn't see people. And I thought that Joe maybe was exaggerating. Maybe out of just the fear and confusion of the situation. He thought he saw people jumping, and in fact it was debris coming down. But we then decided we would go to the fire department command post, which was 2 blocks away, right at the base of the North Tower. The fire department of New York fights fires by setting up a command post so they can see the fire. And this command post was set up so that Chief Gansey, Peter Gansey, who was the chief uniformed officer of the New York City Fire Department, could observe the fire and therefore direct his men as to how to fight it. As we were approaching the command post, I saw Father Michael Judge, who I had known for 7 years. He's the chief chaplain of the fire department. Absolutely remarkable man. And I leaned over to him because he was walking in one direction, I was walking in the other, and I leaned over to him and I grabbed his hand, and I would always ask him to pray for me. Every time I saw him, I would ask him to pray for me. And he would always, he's a man with a great sense of humor. And I would grab his hand, and I would say, "Pray for me," and his response almost uniformly was, "It would be better if you prayed for yourself. It would be more unusual." So I was expecting that response. I didn't get that response. I just got the response, "Yes." And I saw a concern, a fear in his face that I'd never seen before. And I had been with him at the deathbed of maybe 20 firefighters, and maybe he had 40 fires. And he wasn't a man that got concerned very easily. As I was getting closer to the fire department command post, the police officers with me were telling me to look up. And they were telling me to look up because things were falling from the building and they were hitting people and injuring them or maybe killing them. And I saw some of that. And then all of a sudden, I realized that what I was actually seeing was a man getting himself ready to throw himself out of the 101st, 102nd floor of the North Tower. And I just stopped, and I watched him. I watched him throw himself out, come down to the ground. And I probably was in shock. I'd never seen anything like that before, and it was hard to contemplate that. Didn't have time to recognize human shock. But I said to the people around me, "This is much worse than we've ever faced before. We don't have a plan for this. We're just going to have to do the best we can and ask for God's help. Let's just all remain as calm as possible and just figure out what can we do to help." So I walked up to Chief Gansey, and the first thing I said to him was, "Can we get a helicopter at the top of the building?" And he looked at me, and I knew Pete very, very well. He'd been the chief for many years, and I'd been at many fires with him. And he said to me, "Mayor, my guys can save everybody below the fire." Now, what he was saying to me was, "Don't ask me to put my men above the fire because they'll all die." And it was a terrible feeling that it left me with, because you could see the people above the fire, And what the chief was telling me was they were all going to die. And there was nothing that could be done for them without risking the lives of hundreds of firefighters. But he repeated, but I can save everybody below the fire. Now, he's going to fast forward for a moment to the 9/11 Commission report. In the 9/11 Commission report, one of the things that I guess made me the proudest was to read that the 9/11 Commission concluded that the New York City Fire Department saved 96% of the people that they were capable of saving. So Pete knew exactly what he was doing, even in the middle of this unbelievable confusion. I then asked him, what should I tell people? And he said, tell them to go north. Tell them to get out of here and go north. And I said, what can the police department do to help you? And he said, they can get these people out of here. Because people were leaving the building, and even though some of them were getting hit by debris, a certain number of people were remaining behind and just watching the fire, as if mesmerized by it. There's a phenomenon that happens with fires that's like that. And he wanted them out of there because it was dangerous to them, and it made it impossible for him to bring in the fire equipment that he needed to fight the fire. So we had a little longer conversation about getting relief for him, bringing in more firefighters, and then I left the police commissioner with him for a few minutes. And then we left and we went to the police department command post, which was 2 blocks away. When I got there, I called the White House to make sure we had air support, because in the interim I had been told that there were maybe 7 or 10 more planes that were unaccounted for. They might be heading for New York City. I had also been told that the Pentagon was attacked and that the Sears Tower in Chicago was attacked. So it seemed like this was a full-out invasion, attack, massive attack on our country. And I reached the Deputy Political Director of the White House, Chris Hennick, and I asked him if we had air support. And he said, affirmative. You do. We dispatched the jets about 12 minutes ago. They should be there very shortly. I said, do we have to be concerned about other planes? He said, yes. We're tracking 7 to 12 planes, and we have no idea if they're headed for New York, Washington, Chicago, but there is a possibility that there are planes that are going to be heading for New York. And I said, I'd like to speak to the president. He said, well, we're evacuating the White House, and the vice president will call you back. And I hung up. About a minute later, the White House called back. I picked up the phone. The White House secretary, operator, was on the phone. And she said, the vice president's on the phone to talk to you. And I waited for the vice president, but before he could get on the phone line, the desk started to shake. It looked like an earthquake. The people outside, the little cubicle I was in, went under their desks. And Chief Esposito, who was the third-ranking officer of the police department, yelled out, the tower has come down. Get under your desk, the tower has come down. I thought he meant the radio tower at the top of the Twin Towers. I couldn't conceive at that point that the whole tower, the whole building was actually coming down, and it was hitting our building. We were trapped in our building for 20 or 30 minutes. Due to the help of 2 janitors, they found an exit for us where we went through another building, and we were able to get out. And when we got out, we were in the hallway of another building, and it looked like we had gone from bad to worse, because outside was chaos. It looked like what you would think a nuclear attack would look like. Dark clouds, white clouds, dark clouds, going through the streets, debris being carried along with it. Several people had just come in from the outside and they were seriously injured, bleeding, hurt, in one case almost unconscious. And we had to make a decision about whether to leave the building we were in or stay there. And I had with me the 4 or 5 ranking police officers in the police department, emergency services, I had with me the core of people that would have to deal with this. So the police commissioner and I made a decision that we would go outside. Because even though some people might be injured outside, there was a real chance that we get crushed in the building we were in. And then we decided to set up a command post at the firehouse and then at the police academy. It was incredible chaos. And the only way I was able to remain focused on what I had to do was constantly reminding myself of something my father taught me when I was very young. My father taught me when I was very young that if you were ever in an emergency, if you're ever in a fire, become calm. Stay calm, because you can think better if you remain calm. If you get too emotional, if you get too excited, you'll get confused. And I kept repeating that to myself maybe 100 times that day. Just remain calm and shut out the emotions that you're feeling about the destruction that you're seeing, maybe the impossibility of getting out of this. And because I had to remain focused on two things. One thing, to make sure we had the best possible recovery effort at the World Trade Center, but I had to devote an equal amount of attention to the possibility that we'd be attacked in other parts of the city. So the police commissioner and I evacuated 400,000 people from Lower Manhattan. We cut off all the bridges and tunnels so that nobody else could come in, because we were afraid that suicide bombers might come in, particularly from New Jersey. That was the place from which the attack in 1993 on the World Trade Center was planned, at a mosque in New Jersey. And we wanted to make sure that the rest of the city was secure. I got through that day. When I got to that evening, I gave my third or fourth press conference, which is when I said,